Hello, I'm Dapper Dan Gavoston, and I own every issue of Amazing Spider Man, including the annuals, which definitely count.
And I'm mischievous Mark Giannacchio, and I too own every issue of Amazing Spider-Man, but the annuals. And Dan, despite the topic of today's show, I'm kind of on the fence about these .LRs and whether or not they count. But we'll get into that.
All right, all right. Well, hey, everybody, welcome to the Amazing Spider Talk, the show where two fans and collectors uncover the strange, fun, and fascinating history of the Spider Man comic universe. And thanks for joining us for this review episode of the all new Amazing Spider Talk.
Yes, today on the show, Dan and I will be discussing Amazing Spider-Man Volume 5, number 51.LR and number 52 C853. But let's start with that Amazing Spider-Man 51.LR, which is written by Nick Spencer and Matthew Rosenberg, with art by Federico Vincentini, colors by Marcio Menez, and letters by VC's Ariana Mar, and a cover by Marcelo Ferreira and David Curiel. Dan, this issue was first released on November 4th, 2020. So let's get right into it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the kind of first thing we should talk about, Mark, is how you open the show, which is your dubious nature about these LR issues. I think the last one seemed atypical because it was about Peter, and the back of the book suggested that Peter would not be appearing in these much anymore, and I think this issue, pretty much, lived up to that idea. So, what do you think? Like, what is this book now? Do you have a clearer idea of what this is?
Yeah, I mean this feels, similar to those .hu issues, which I mean, of course, they all focused on a different villain during the Hunted storyline, where this kind of feels like we're just focusing on everyone else in the supporting cast. And, I guess this is, obviously Last Rites. It's a big. Is it Last Rites or Last Remains? I'm sorry. Am I
Last remains.
Last Remains, sorry. Woo. Well, LR, I mean, I had a 50-50 shot then. Um, Last Remains, it's obviously going to be a big story, and it's, as we'll get into a little later, it's going to be a very Peter-centric story. I mean, I guess my little snark in the beginning is, at the same time, yeah, it's good to spend this time with the supporting cast, but it still feels like padding to me. Like, I'm just like, do we really need a whole issue dedicated to these little subplots that, obviously it's gonna focus in at some point, but it kind of just feels like, if you go back to like Spider Island back in 20, what was that, 2011, 2012, where it was like, the Venom story and like some of those mini series, it's like, like it's fun and it gives you a little more illumination to be reading it to get, but like these are, for the most part, these plot points, this is not what's driving my interest to this story. I want to see Spider-Man and Kindred. You know what I mean? So it's like kind of getting this other stuff is I get it, but I'm not like, oh man, I can't. I got to keep reading the saga to see what Black Cat did with the Hand of Ashanti today. You know what I mean? Like I just don't know if I care that much about some of these other little plot beats, and I don't know if that makes me a bad fan or not. But that's just where I'm at.
No, I don't think that this is like A level content. It's not the main story, but I do appreciate this format of this. Like, I feel like it allows the main story to kind of keep its momentum without having to kind of dip into these kind of beats. And I think this story has its own momentum that's moving forward. I'm not, I'm like you. I'm not as interested in this story as I am in the main one, but I think that's like apt considering how they're naming this. Like, if they were to call these regular issues of Amazing Spider-Man, I think it would be a little more disturbing. And I know that that doesn't make much sense considering, it's a book like any other, but that .lr does allow me to kind of just accept that this is some smaller thing that's going off on the side. But I think what I like about these, even though what's going on in them is kind of like sometimes really dark or really awful, I do think Matthew Rosenberg's writing is a bit lighter than what Nick Spencer is writing in the main title. And so for me, breaking up those issues has kind of been nice. Like it allows the tone to kind of bounce around a little bit, and I don't feel quite so weighed down by the regular Last Remains story that's going on. Um, and in that regard, I do think that this has kind of been a fun counterbalance. And frankly, maybe I'm just a sucker, but I like getting a new Spider-Man book every week, or in this case, like two, or
Right.
whatever you want.
Spider-Man
Whenever you're
comic
approaching
overload.
listening to this. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, and to the point I was making just before, I mean, I guess if my option is, 5 or 6 issues like this, or like 3 or 4 different 3-part miniseries, each, like, oh, we're gonna do Black Cat, Doctor Strange mini, and an MJ Norman Osborn mini, and an Order of the Spider mini. Like, I'd rather have this. Which is to say, like, I think the other format, which I just mentioned, was what we had been getting with these big spider events in recent years. So this is a little more streamlined and clean. And like you said, yeah, Rosenberg's style is definitely a nice counterweight to Spencer's darker tones. And we're getting A+ art on this book, man. Like
yeah.
I think the art has been great. Like, it doesn't feel like the B Squad is doing this, especially Marcelo Ferreira, especially. He's just, it looks great. These books look great. So overall, good stuff. I'm just not sure the stories themselves, if I'm like on the edge of my seat reading this stuff. That's my criticism.
The art is enough to kind of keep me hooked. I mean, this guy I think is really like a great team player. I mean, I don't know necessarily what that means, but to me, it's like Marcelo Ferreira, or not Marcelo, Marcelo Ferreira and Federico Vincentini. Like this kind of like pairing is really excellent. I do think the cover is weirdly misleading. Like
Right.
the interior artist and the cover artist did not really pair up. But Federico Vincentini to me is like a superstar on this book, and I'm really enjoying his art. And we cover so many different things in this book, from like bridge collapse to we'll get to the big reveal at the end, and all of it is done with kind of an appropriate level of pacing, whether it's like fast and light, or like slow and brooding. I don't know how much that's the writer versus the artist, but I do feel like these books are being very well handled. And Marcio Menez, I don't know this person in the colors, but I think it's a great pairing here. I don't know if this is like an art team that kind of came together aboard this book, but it feels like a kind of like a group of people that really know how to complement each other very well. So yeah, we want to get to some of the content in this book rather than hinting, more about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's start with the Sin Eater, whose the reports of his death by the hand of Kindred were greatly exaggerated. He is alive and well here. He was rescued by his followers, and he's still devoting himself to the cause. Dan, he's gonna cleanse the sins. So Sin Eater is still on the board, I guess, if for those playing that game at home.
Yeah, the big question is like, does he still retain his sin sucking gun power? Like he had all those sins ripped out of him, but it seems like he's still somewhat demonic, even if he doesn't retain the like superpowers of the people that he stole all that stuff from. There does seem like, because based on the suggestion that we'll get to at the end of the book, that he has some tactic. It would seem to rob these villains or whatever of their powers. So I'm interested to see how that continues to play out. But like for all I'm concerned, like Sin Eater is back on board for Spider-Man's villains for the long haul. I mean, I don't know that he survives this storyline, but we do have an active Sin Eater back in the Spider-Man universe. It seems.
There you go. For whatever that's worth, for the people that
Yeah.
just needed Peter David's creation back. The other subplot we got introduced, as I referred to earlier, we had fun little interplay with Black Cat and Doctor Strange. Obviously, I mean, it feels like Black Cat as a character is back to getting elevated again. I think obviously the rehab that the character has experienced between, obviously in the pages of ASM from Spencer and then her own ongoing series, which I guess is canceled but is coming back at some point during King in Black, I believe. Am I mistaken with that, Dan?
Yeah, no, you're not wrong. And it seems like it's not just for a mini series; it's going to be retain its ongoing status. So, count that amongst the female-led spider books that get constantly rebooted. But
Right, right. So, I mean,
I'm here for it just as long as we get more issues of that book.
yeah, but like I mean, like like in terms of pairings that I would not have expected to enjoy. I mean, Black Cat and Doctor Strange is a fun one, right? I mean, I enjoy the little cat and mouse, if you will, pun intended, I guess, with over the hand of Ashanti here. It was fun. I thought this was fun.
Yeah, and it's very brief. We see them, and she's now tagging along, and then we leave them right behind. So then we pick back up with MJ, who has returned from Los Angeles, or was it Montana? I don't really know based on how that series ended, but she's looking to reconnect with Peter, and she kind of negotiates with her driver to kind of like get her some bagels and stuff, and or at least get him bagels. And then suddenly, of course, it can't be MJ without her returning to New York and getting put in distress.
Right.
So her car is destroyed, and who is there to rescue her from this attack by the Order of Spiders who are destroying this bridge? None other than Norman Osborn, recently healed Norman Osborn. And Mark, my immediate thought was, oh great, we get another Norman lifting scene. But then also, how the hell did Norman know to be there for this?
Yeah, I mean, his timing and just knowledge of where to be at the right time is impeccable, I guess. I mean, they obviously want to get Norman and MJ on the board together, and of course, Norman explains that this killer that's on that's going after Peter is of course Harry, and MJ is just kind of like in disbelief because when do we in the pages of ASM do we remember when MJ and Harry were last together? Because she
I,
indicated that she
I
just saw him, didn't she? Like it was kind of like it wasn't a throwaway line, but she was like, "That's impossible. I just saw him. He's fine."
I don't remember that necessarily, but I do. I have to imagine they saw each other in the pages of 800.
That makes sense. So, well, anyway, so like, I mean, and we'll obviously get into some of this stuff when we talk about the Kindred and Spider-Man stuff in 52. But we're the Kindred alarm, we can still sound it even though we think we know what the answers are. Like that to me kind of feels like it's important content there that there was some incredulousness from MJ about Harry being this sinister villain here. So just wanted to put that out there.
Interesting, interesting. Okay, I have to reread it because I don't remember that sequence, but I trust you on that. Norman's teleporting abilities and spider tracer abilities aside, we return to the Sin Eater, who we teased earlier is trying to regain some kind of powers. Excuse me, allergy season.
Gesundheit.
And he suggests that he is going to still keep up with the task of Kindred, which is to cleanse the world of sin, starting with the spiders, right, that are attacking the city. And boy, oh boy, he's going to go after a very large prey to help him do so. And that is none other than Morlun. Mark, what did you think when you saw this?
Honestly, I mean, this was kind of one of the big eye roll moments for me of this book. I mean, I got to be honest, I did read Spider-Geddon when it came out, but its impact on me was probably, next to zero. So I don't actually even remember how that all wrapped up and what came of Moreland and the Inheritors. But like, so seeing him back, I was kind of like, all right, I guess he's clearly still alive, but like, I don't know. Like, I wasn't really ready to do the mental gymnastics of how that would be, and I don't know if it's a big no prize worthy situation or not. I mean, is your memory a little better than mine on that one, Dan?
Yeah, so at the end of Spider-Geddon, all the inheritors were captured and they used the like de-aging technology to turn them into babies. But Moreland was left out of that because Spider-Man had fought him independently at like the Central Park Zoo. So he like traps him in this thing that looks like a Iron Maiden and calls the
Hmm.
police to come and like apprehend him, which I don't think is the smartest of ideas considering it's Moreland.
Right.
But okay, he's trapped in this Iron Maiden thing, and it appears that Moreland was able to escape. Now, Mark, you and I have already read 52.LR, but we're not doing a review of that tonight. In that
Right.
book, it's revealed that he broke free from that and got out. I think it's kind of silly that Moreland escaped off panel and
Right.
nobody bothered to follow up on that. But like, fine, it's comics. This kind of thing happens all the time, and fine. So for me, it was like, okay, I'm glad that Moreland is still a villain that we can play with, and he wasn't destroyed like the rest of the Inheritors, which I'm thankful for. I never really liked the Inheritors, but I do still like Moreland in concept.
Yeah.
Um, for me, this was a big out of left field, and my bigger concern was more like more like, are we getting too big here with this story? It felt focused, and now we're bringing in the Inheritors or something like that. But then at the same time, I think back to Spider Island, and I think, okay, well, that storyline really incorporated stuff from every era of this title into it in a natural way, and maybe there's a way we're dealing with a lot of JMS themes. So maybe there's a way they're going to tie it in. And I don't want to ruin our review for 52.LR, but I thought that what they did with Moreland there was kind of interesting, speaking of Spider Island. So
Right.
I'm more willing to go for the ride, but initially from these pages, as cool as they looked and as thrilled as I was to see one of my favorite villains, you're right. It was totally out of left field.
Yeah, I mean, totally out of left field, and like, I mean, even with, not to jump ahead, but even with some possible interesting plot developments in the next issue of this offshoot series here, I mean, like, I don't know, like, I'm not trying to be too precious with my Spider-Man Rogues gallery here, but like, like stuff like this makes me worry if we're kind of diminishing the importance of Moreland because I mean, like, we went from this character being a special attraction a la when Venom first came on the scene in the 90s, you know what I mean? Like to the fact that like he's now like showing up in offshoot series, even if he's got a major subplot going on here, it's like, this guy was, like kind of at one point, this unkillable, unbeatable foe, and now it's like, he can't even bother to confront the main hero of the book anymore because he's got other stuff going on. It just I don't know. Like to me, it seems like it's the further cheapening of a character that once was a special attraction, and I always kind of my heart always thinks a little bit about that because it's like, I feel like when you create something that's that unique and that kind of like a big deal when he shows up, you don't want to dilute it, and I feel like this is the diluting of Moreland continued.
And I'm totally sensitive to that, and I think you're more right than I am to be excited by just seeing his reappearance. Like my bigger fear would be that he gets the Juggernaut treatment in this book, which is
Mm.
he just gets a shotgun blast and he becomes just a power set for this character to wield. So I mean, if it elevates Sin Eater, fine. But I didn't need Sin Eater elevated more than I needed Moreland brought back as a serious foe. So I think there. Yeah, you're right. It is wise to use caution on things like this, but at the same time, I do think that like villains appear and reappear. If we had kind of left Doctor Octopus to just be who he was when he showed up in ASM 3, would we have ever gotten him marrying Aunt May? I mean, what would the world be
Right.
like without that?
I
No,
mean,
I think a
these are
villain.
valid points, then.
I mean, villains can be elevated and de-elevated wherever at whim. So it doesn't really worry me all that much. But you're right, overusing something can lead to it being cheapened. So it's something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, yeah. Do we want to do a quick grade on this before we go to 52, or do we want to wrap everything up at the end?
Sure, yeah. I'm gonna give this one like a C plus.
I am same as you. C plus on this. I mean, like I said, some fun sequences, some other eye rolly stuff. But let's get to the main course here, which is Amazing Spider-Man number 52. Which well, why don't you intro it, Dan? I don't want to step on your line here.
No, no. I mean, it's my turn to butcher names. Of course, I give myself all the easy ones.
Yeah, yeah, okay. Can
Uh,
can you say Spencer and Gleason, Dan?
I want to keep saying Spencer and Gleason because if this partnership yields things like this, then sign me up. So yes, next we're going to be talking about Amazing Spider-Man Volume 5, number 52. That's Legacy 853 for those of you counting, which, as I say every week, you all are. It's written by Nick Spencer. It's got art by Patrick Gleason and covers by Edgar Delgado and letters by VC's Joe Caramagna. There's our old friend. And a cover by Patrick Gleason and Edgar Delgado. And the issue was first released on November 11th, 2020. Along with another issue, which we'll be talking about next week. So, Mark, Amazing Spider-Man number 52. Let's just go big, broad thoughts. And I think this is going to be one of those issues for big, broad thoughts because maybe
Yeah,
it's a
I
little
mean,
light on plot.
yeah, I was gonna say. I mean, when you actually like kind of like lay out, well, what happened in this issue? It's not a lot, but what we get here is a big moment, I think, for this book and for this run and for Nick Spencer. I mean, we finally get the Spider-Man Kindred confrontation. So, sound all the Kindred alarms and bells that you want. We got it. We kind of came back to the theme that we've been hitting both in this book and if you read any of the interviews that Spencer has given, well, that one specifically from CBR, Spider-Man says, "Who are you?" And it's not Kindred's reply, it's not who I am, it's how I got here. And I think like these are words that I think we need to hold on to because I have a feeling that when it comes to this character, Dan, what we think we know so far and the predictions that we've made so far, I think we're still in line for some swerves, don't you think?
I think so too. I think if it's to be as straightforward as presented, which I don't even know if it's truly that straightforward. I think that would be a big letdown. And I don't think the story is guiding us towards really thinking this is just something as pat as Harry Osborn under this mask, if you will. This issue really brought back to mind for me our Shush name because
Hmm.
this is the issue where Kindred most resembled Hush to
Hmm.
me. And I do miss our Shush name for Kindred. But I'm just gonna say it. Sound the biggest Kindred alarm of all, because the moment you're right, Mark, has finally come. Peter and Kindred face off, and for my money, I thought it lived up to the hype. I mean, I don't think it justified the wait time, but like if it took this time to get Patrick Gleason lined up to draw this book, then so be it.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I mean, Gleason's been knocking it out of the park for months now. But yeah, I mean, like his Kindred is absolutely terrifying, and um, in terms of the actual sequence, the fight between him and Spider-Man, I mean, like Spidey doesn't have a doesn't have a shot, and yet like I sometimes get annoyed. I think we talked about this a lot during Spider-Verse way back when, where what I would talk about like the what I refer to as the hope spot. Like okay, when you're going against unstoppable villains, you kind of need to know, where the Wop Rat sized weakness in the defense system of the Death Star is, so you know that there's a shot, and you don't get that here with Kindred at all. But like, I think after all of this build and all of this time and all of the threats, there shouldn't be yet a Womp Rat sized hole in the Death Star. You know what I mean? So, I mean, Kindred just wipes the floor with them, and which again, if you think it's Harry Osborn, even with some kind of souped up powers, like that's got to give you pause that this character could just kick Spidey's rear end so thoroughly here, right?
Yeah, I mean, this thing is really reminding me of Coming Home. I mean, speaking of Moreland,
Hmm.
we really have like this kind of Spider-Man against the impossible villain. But also, this reminds me of Superior Number Nine, which is like that moment in the dreamscape of true failure for Peter, a sort of like unrecoverable disaster. And this issue feels like that. It's the pit of your stomach, he's not coming back from this, folks. Moment in the book. Now, I don't know that it hits quite as hard as Superior Nine did. Like, I don't feel like all hope is completely lost in the way that I did in that book, or at least in the way that I kind of pretended to do in that book, because, of course, there's always hope for Spider-Man so long as a book is published with his name on it. Uh, this is maybe the highest stakes we've gotten in this run, and I thought it really delivered. And a lot of that is the art, but that's just not to shirk the writing too, because the parry of words is equally palpable. I feel like in this book.
Yeah, I mean, and I think similar to Superior Nine, this whole fight sequence, like you really do have to question what's real, and by real I mean, I don't mean like, I mean, I'm trying to put this in the right words. Like, I mean, like, no, I think this happened, but it's not happening the way we see it as happening, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? Like, this is like the threat to Spider-Man is real. No matter, like, I don't think that is false. And I think, but like, is this physically happening in a physical sense, or is this something more like kind of metaphysical, or in some kind of other realm, if you will? And that's not entirely clear, and that's kind of, I think, in some ways maybe raises the stakes even more, because we're not, Spider-Man is not fighting on solid earth here. You know what I mean? Like, that elevates the stake level tremendously, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of come down on this being the dreamscape ultimately, like most of this fight. I don't know if that means that if Kindred ever dug up those corpses or not. I mean, that seems like a very physical act to do, to dig up those corpses. Whereas in other moments in this book, he seems like he's able to kind of control and conjure up whatever he wants. Specifically, I'm thinking of when Kindred shoves Spider-Man through a mirror. Like, to me, that is like pure fantasy. And on the other side of the mirror is Spider-Man waking up by the Queensboro / Brooklyn Bridge, or George Washington, whatever you want to, whatever bridge in New York that these things are occurring on. So I'm inclined to think that most of the book is in the dreamscape up until the end. But like I said, those bodies seem very physical, and we actually get some of the names for the bodies here, and it's kind of the typical cast of like people that have died under Peter's watch, including Uncle Ben, whose decomposing body I don't know that I ever needed to see, but there it is. I think there's a few corpses we didn't get names on. Like, didn't see anybody that had the Hitler hair that we were talking about last episode, so I'm still kind of a little foggy on who some of those other people are. Is that Charlemagne? I don't know, but
It's the
You know,
second week in a row you've mentioned Charlemagne, Dan. You want Charlemagne. You want Charlie.
I do. I very much do. I mean, that's one of those like weird, like things that gets referenced in the history of these books, or more referenced more recently, when I don't think really anybody has read that book. Like it's one of those things that's like really niche, and yet gets referenced more than you'd think. But what's interesting here is that like Kindred seems to finally tie together what's going on between all of them, which is that like he's brought them all here because Spider-Man killed them, and they're all family or kindred, if you will.
Mm.
And you know, to me, that's like maybe some of the bigger clues that we've gotten about like Kindred and his goals. You know, it's all about who Spider-Man, I guess, like would tangentially killed, or his life or his existence affected their lives in some way. So, although I think that's a little bit unfair on Uncle Ben, because I think if Spider-Man didn't exist, he would still have died. It's just that Spider Peter didn't act. But
Right,
anyway,
right.
what was your reaction to this? I mean, is this just in keeping with what we've kind of suspected all along?
Um, I mean, are you talking about in terms of like Kindred's identity, or what do you mean? I'm sorry, I missed the
I
thrust of
mean,
your
like
question there.
Kindred's motivation.
I mean, it's very clear. Like this is, like we've dealt with these storylines before in terms of Peter's failures and what do they mean to him. But like this really kind of seems like the granddaddy of them all. Like we're just like I think this is the first time we've kind of seen like this truly seems to be the physical manifestation of all of Peter's failures. And I'm not saying that to go jump to is Kindred truly Harry or not. I just mean like Kindred seems to kind of be fueling on all of these various failures in a way that that others haven't. Like we've kind of like dealt with these failures individually over the years. Like kind of like the floating heads of guilt that come at Peter at various points in his story. But like we are yet to have a villain that can kind of use all of them against him in a way. So that to me is kind of the wrinkle with this character, right? I mean, like we've never really had a villain that could just, I mean, outside of Doc Ock occupying Peter's brain, but even then, I don't feel like I don't know if we got this kind of sequence from Doc Ock during that run, right?
No, I mean the only thing I can think of is like not even a villain. It's more thematic, which is like the no one dies stuff, kind of ties
Right.
into this idea, but
But
that's not
like I
you
said,
know
that's
characterized.
no, that's more like I said, that's the floating heads of shame thing. You know what I mean? Like we've of guilt. We've gotten that a ton of times. I mean, like there's so many stories where Peter is looking back and I have failed this person, I have failed that person. I mean, No One Dies was a great kind of manifestation of all that. But like Kindred to me seems to be the first villain to kind of be grabbing all of these moments and bringing. I mean, he's literally bringing them together at the table with all these corpses and saying, "This is your failure, Peter, in front of you." Which again, so that let's stop tap dancing here, Dan. I mean, are we like I was, hey, I could say I was right and hold on to the idea that Kindred is some kind of manifestation of Harry Osborn, right? I mean, that's what
Mm.
we learned 2 issues ago when Kindred is Harry. But like I think it's something much deeper and greater than that, right? With the way this is being worded. I mean, like the words really matter here, the visuals really matter here. There's something more than just Harry going on here.
Yeah, and I'm going to keep reiterating the thing that I've kind of been saying from the beginning is that I think that this is Nick Spencer's way of finally addressing One More Day directly. You know, there's these hellish elements, and by the end of this story, which we'll talk about, I think we're really going to go straight to the heart of it. Like we're literally going to go there and deal with it. Especially if you've seen the preview pages for issue 53. which really get into One More Day. I just think that like if it's Harry, if it's all these people, whatever the deal that Peter made with Mephisto was, and its effect on the world around him, and how that was driven by guilt versus responsibility. Like to me, that's at the heart of all this, and maybe Harry is the greatest representation of some aspect of that, but I'm much more inclined to believe that the Harry thing is still maybe a red herring, and Norman is experiencing that because Harry is his greatest guilt in some regard. I would not be displeased if it was Harry, and I think that that's more likely than not that it is Harry. But I do think One More Day is going to play into the heart of this. Whether it's the marriage personified or whatever, it's whatever that deal that Peter made and why he made that deal that kind of cuts to the heart of all of this. And I think the end of this issue really strongly leans into that. Should I talk about that now, or do you want to hold back on that?
Well, no, I was gonna say. So speaking of deals here, so I mean, just to kind of catch us up plot wise. So we do have kind of Spider-Man rallying at one point, and Kindred even kind of mocks him about it, saying, "Oh, it's just here's the part where Spider-Man overcomes the odds," and then of course you know, Peter goes through a sequence where it looks like he's putting a dent in the armor, and then he's quickly subdued again by Kindred. I mean, like again, just gets torn apart for the most part, and that brings us to the scene outside with the Order of the Spider, and they're all demonically possessed and causing havoc, and we have Spider Gwen throwing Miles off the bridge. Name your bridge. And Peter cuts another deal, and it's fascinating how he keeps cutting deals here, right, Dan?
Yeah, I mean that has to be intentional, right? So like he's cutting a deal, and there's even like the handshake being extended, and Kindred seems to know that like Peter would do this, and to me this is like the ultimate trap, right? And the deal is that Peter wants all of them to be saved, and for him to die, right? He's willing to sacrifice himself for all of them. And, they're all saved, and Kindred does exactly that, which is then he kills Peter by snapping his neck, a la Gwen Stacy. And, which is a great moment, in terms of what a stinger for an end of an issue. But to me, it's like, I expect the next issue to open up in some version of hell, right? I mean, like, that's where we're going, right? We're going to hell, and Peter is going to confront this demon that he made a deal with, and those decisions. I mean, to me, that's the only place this could go. Is that what you're thinking, Mark?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and again, like I'm not trying to beat the same drum and try and justify my predictions and stuff like that, but like again, like when Peter made the initial deal with Mephisto with his marriage, I mean, one of the ramifications of that deal or consequences, if you will, seem to be the resurrection of Harry. So like again, like this is all connected. Like I don't know exactly how Spencer is going to connect all of these dots, but it seems to me this is so intentional. Like I don't even know. Like it's not subtle at all, Dan. I mean, like we're going to hell, like you say, and we're going to learn now exactly what kind of hell Peter has unleashed in making these deals, because it does seem like he is, for someone who is so noble and true, he does seem to kind of want to, even when he's quote unquote sacrificing himself, it's like he is looking for shortcuts to get to the ends that he wants. Even like yes, it's selfless that he's ready to sacrifice himself to save his friends here, but like why is he making a deal with another demonic presence? You know what I mean? Like it never works. This is the oldest story in literature, like you make a deal with the devil, it doesn't work out for you. Like you never get what you want.
I thought the mirror imagery was really interesting in this issue. I mean, we'll talk about imagery in general in this issue because we can't not talk about Patrick Gleason in this issue. But you know, Kindred suggests like not only am I all your ghosts that live on through me, but also that like you know Peter's greatest enemy is always himself. Like it's like fighting his reflection in a mirror. And I do
Yeah.
think that maybe there is a version of this that ends with Kindred being like some iteration of Peter. And I know people have suspected that, but you know, I wonder if this character just takes on the appearance of like whatever your greatest guilty sin is or whatever, you know, and that's why Norman is so convinced it's Harry and so on and so forth, you know. Uh, there is still a mask on this character for a reason. And I do suspect that we will see under that mask, and it will be something, whatever it is. So anyway, what do you think of Patrick Gleason overall in this issue? Because I mean, we've been gushing about this guy, and I could gush more about this individual title.
Yeah, I mean, like I don't I hesitate to say this is like the best art we've gotten on this book in a while because, Stuart Immonen still exists and I loved what him and Slott were doing towards the end of their run there on this book. But like, I mean, like, no disrespect to Ryan Otley, who did some wonderful stuff here with Spencer, but like this is like this pairing with Gleason here is perfect. You know what I mean? Like Gleason is just absolutely capturing the moment and the themes and driving this stuff home. Like you said, the mirror imagery throughout this book is both, it's not subtle, and but also like it's so masterfully rendered, and the fight sequences between him and Kindred. I mean, like Kindred is Kindred needs to be terrifying to sell the threat here, and this Kindred artistically is terrifying. Like it's kind of this, and again, like not to keep coming back, it's an amalgamation of like all of Spider-Man's villains. It seems like he's got the tentacles of Doc Ock and the just the chaotic nature of the Goblin, and it's just all of these things kind of coming together visually in one, in one, embodied in one character, and Gleason is just nailing it every which way.
Even just like the little visuals, like the spider facing up against the centipede, took me back to like Craven's Last Hunt with the kind of spider rat imagery that
Hmm.
was very effective in that book. The kind of full page splashes here of Spider-Man like fighting Kindred, and the tentacles weaving, and the layouts that like go backwards and forwards. You feel completely unmoored in space by the images, but it's always easy to read. I'm never confused by following it. It's like the best of every different spider artist kind of combined. It's got that kind of grounded weight to it that gives it real consequence. But then it's also got the fanciful superhero things. I love the redesign of Spider-Man's eyes as by Gleason. I think like any like really standout Spider-Man artist redesigns the eyes to fit them in some way. And Gleason's are big and white, and they've got these little like fringe on the ends of them that gives them this kind of like stylistic kind of thing. And it's just like a level of care that suggests that this guy has wanted to draw this character enough that he's begun deviating in his own way of how he puts it on the page. I'm still not sold by his Peter quite yet. To me, Peter is still kind of bland. But man, this guy in superheroes, I love this darkness that he's getting, and I'm hopeful at the end of this story we can get some light with Gleason as well, because his Superman stuff was so optimistic and empowering in a way that a Superman comic should be. But I also want to see his approach with that with Spider-Man, just because, um, Spider-Man can be optimistic here and there. Why not? But I'm here for the crazy Gleason stuff. I mean, that page of Spider-Man breaking through the glass, the full page splash of the glass shattering and him falling into darkness. I mean, iconic. Takes me back to the Superior stuff with those web pages of Peter and all of his memories. It's like the contrasted opposite of that.
Yeah, 100%. Do you wanna give this one a grade, or do you got anything else you want to pick up on here?
Not really. I mean, I am there for next week. I can't wait to see how this thing continues. This book is on a streak, and I think, gosh, this is hard. I want to give this thing an A, but I think it's like an A minus, just because it's not like we haven't gotten to the heart of this yet. We're getting there. This thing is like an A minus for me.
I have a similar sentiment to you, but like I'm giving this a B plus. This is great. This was absolutely great, but like I feel like you said, like I want to save the higher grades for what I think is coming, because I think I don't want to raise the bar too high, because I think better stuff is coming down the pipeline. But the fact of the matter is, like, in contrast to what we got with Hunted, which was, I think, kind of a letdown after a great opening chapter, like truly this is what Spencer has been building towards, because like there is a lot of care and craft in these first 2 issues of this story thus far, and I am absolutely excited to see where this goes.
Yeah, I guess you're right. I don't want to applaud before the magician pulls the bunny out of the hat, but like I'm really enjoying the magician's showmanship right now. So, I'm
these are all subjective,
I'm almost
Dan.
ready to clap.
Give it what you want. Give it what your heart wants, Dan.
Oh, my heart wants to love Spider-Man comics. So and I feel like we're here. So, and we hope that you guys listening at home are enjoying these like as much as we are, because, when we like comics, I think it's a good time for all.
100%. All right, Dan. Well, it is that time for all good things to come to an end. So we want to say thank you to you, the listeners and viewers, for tuning into this episode of The Amazing Spider Talk.
Yeah, this episode was edited by Rick Coast with production support from Andy Myers. Our artwork comes handcrafted by artists Ron Friends, Sal Buscema, and Ray Sumser. And our theme songs were produced by Rylan Bojack, Tony Thaxton, and Spider Madge. This episode was originally released on our Patreon. Go check it out. We did it as a live stream hangout back when the comic was first released. So, if you'd like to help support our show's continued existence and these reviews while joining us on the live stream or getting it in your podcast feed, why not head on over to our Patreon and sign up? We got a great community over there. So, Mark, until we're left pleading for death from a twisted representation of our own worst sins, namely giving Flash Thompson a co-hosting spot on the show, what is our motto?
All right, there, Dapper Dan. Of course, our motto is, with great podcasts, there must also come the amazing Spider Talk.
The angles uncover and untangle all the questions and the webs left out to tangle. In 1962, last Wednesday's afternoon, they'll bend your ears with reckless self-abandon. The amazing Spider Talk. The amazing